Welcome back to The Outsider Edge. One of the things I really love about this show is getting to explore the ideas that you, the listeners, are most curious about. And lately we've had a bunch of requests to dive deeper into a specific aspect of Dr. Ravier's general theory of coaching.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one, right? Like, it's kind of a head-scratcher at first, but once you start thinking about it, it really makes you question some of the basic assumptions we have about the coaching world.
And he basically throws down this gauntlet. He says, coaching has a serious problem.
A problem of identity? Like, what even is coaching? We all use the word, but when you really try to pin it down, it gets kind of slippery.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about, semantics here either. Dr. Ravier makes a compelling argument that this lack of a clear, distinct definition actually hinders the development of coaching as a unique field.
It's almost like if you think about other professions, medicine, law, engineering, they all have very specific parameters, right? You know what a doctor does, you know what a lawyer does. But with coaching, it's kind of all over the place.
And that's what Dr. Ravier really hones in on. He points out that the existing definitions of coaching are so broad, they could easily apply to lots of other helping professions, training, consulting, mentoring, even aspects of psychology.
He actually suggests a fun little exercise. Think of the first 5 words that come to your mind when you hear the word coaching.
Got him?
Okay, now think about, say, a mentor or a therapist. Would those same words apply? Chances are, yeah, a lot of them would.
Think about words like support, development, guidance. Those are all super relevant to coaching, absolutely, but they're not exclusive to it. And that's where Dr. Ravier sees a real issue. He argues that without a clear and unique definition, coaching risks becoming this diluted catch-all term that loses its power and impact.
It's almost like, if a recipe calls for a pinch of spice, it could be anything, right? It doesn't tell you much. But if it says a teaspoon of cumin, now you're getting specific. Now you're building flavor with intention. And that's kind of what Dr. Ravier is pushing for with coaching.
So he's not just critiquing the current state of things, he's actually offering a way forward. And this is where his general theory of coaching comes in. He's saying, look, if we want coaching to really thrive as its own distinct discipline, we need a solid theoretical framework.
And this framework needs to be rooted in something more rigorous than just feel-good vibes and intuition. Dr. Ravier is calling for a scientifically grounded understanding of what coaching is, how it works, and what makes it different from all those other helping roles out there.
It's about defining the DNA of coaching, right? Figuring out what makes it unique and effective on its own terms. And I think that's a really exciting proposition.
Definitely. So how does Ravier propose we actually do this? Well, he starts by digging into the existing definitions of coaching, particularly those put forth by some of the major coaching organizations. And, what he finds is kind of surprising.
What's that?
Well, even these big official definitions often lack that specific something that truly sets coaching apart. They use a lot of the same broad, generic language that we were just talking about. And this, according to Dr. Ravier, can lead to a very eclectic, but ultimately inconsistent approach to methodology.
What do you mean by eclectic?
Well, think about it. If you're not really sure what makes coaching unique, you might end up borrowing techniques from all sorts of different places, therapy, mentoring, consulting, without a clear understanding of how those techniques fit within a specifically coaching context.
And in a way, that actually feeds into another concern that you often hear in the coaching world, right? This worry about intrusiveness. Like, are coaches stepping outside of their lane? Are they trying to do things that they're not really qualified for?
Totally. And Dr. Ravier makes this really interesting point. He says, look, if coaching doesn't have clear boundaries, if it's defined so broadly that almost any kind of helpful interaction could qualify, well, then it becomes almost impossible to say what is intrusive and what isn't.
It's like trying to draw a line in the sand when the tide keeps washing it away, right?
Exactly. And this is why, in Dr. Ravier's view, this definitional issue is so critical to address. If coaching wants to mature as a profession, if it wants to be taken seriously, it needs to define itself in a way that's both robust and specific.
And he's arguing that this definition needs to move beyond those broad, overlapping terms that we see everywhere. It needs to articulate what truly makes coaching distinct. And, really importantly, what makes it effective.
And it's this effectiveness that Dr. Ravier emphasizes in his work. He's advocating for an approach without transference, one that empowers the client to find their own solutions, rather than relying on the coach to provide them.
Which brings us back to his general theory of coaching. This is where he lays out his proposal for building a stronger foundation for the entire field. We're going to dive much deeper into the specifics of his theory in future episodes. But understanding this initial critique, this problem of the missing definition, is really essential for grasping where he's going with it.
It's like, if you're building a house, you got to make sure the ground is solid before you start laying the bricks, right? And Dr. Ravier is saying, hey, the ground under coaching is kind of shaky right now. Let's fix that before we build anything else.
So to sum up what we've learned from this part of Dr. Ravier's work, the current definitions of coaching are too broad, too fuzzy. They make it really hard to distinguish coaching from other helping professions, and they create a lot of confusion about what coaching actually is.
And Dr. Ravier argues that this confusion is not just a theoretical problem, it has real-world consequences. It impacts how coaching is practiced, how it's perceived, and ultimately how effective it can be.
His work challenges us to think more critically about what makes coaching unique and valuable, and to demand more clarity from those who claim to be coaches.
And that's a challenge that I think everyone who's interested in coaching, whether you're a practitioner, a client, or just someone exploring the field, needs to grapple with. What truly sets coaching apart? What are its defining characteristics?
Those are the questions we'll keep exploring as we continue our deep dive into Dr. Ravier's general theory of coaching right here on The Outsider Edge. Thanks for joining us.